This is My Taste is Better Than Yours, the manga podcast where Guardian Enzo and I, Samu, discuss some of our favourite series and figure out, is my taste better than yours?
We're going to talk about Hirayasumi, which is a sign-in series. Just to plug myself, you can check out. I actually have a video of this one on my YouTube channel, the same YouTube channel that these podcasts are going to be uploaded to. So you can check it out there if you want to go in a different take on this series. But Hirayasumi is a sign-in manga. It is published in Big Comic Spirits, which is an excellent magazine, by the way. It's been going on since 2021. It's a bi-weekly title, and the author is Shinzo Keigo, who has done a couple of different series, but this is one that's really kind of been his. I think fair to say this is his breakout series. This is the one that's gotten him the most attention. It's gotten multiple manga taisho nominations and various different manga awards and bookseller awards, all kinds of things. It's currently on 6 volumes, run about 60 chapters or so. He's taken a couple of short hiatuses, but they supposedly have been like doing a hiatus for research kind of thing. I don't think there's any indication that he's had any health issues or anything like that. A very interesting story with Hirayasumi. The mangaka Shinzo had cancer, and as a very young man, and he's only in his early 30s now, I believe. But he had cancer as a very young man, and he faced his mortality and came through it, and it went into remission, and he came out of the other side of that with kind of a new appreciation of life. And I feel like that's an important thing to know about him, because I think as you read Hirayasumi, I think you feel that come through in his writing. I believe very strongly. There's a just to as an example, there's an anime series currently airing called Kyujitsu no Warumono-san, Mr. Villain's Day Off. And after 6 episodes of that, I have not read the manga for that one, but after 6 episodes of the anime, I feel that the message of that series is that life is what happens on the way. And I think that's the message of Hirayasumi too, that we get too focused on the past and too focused on the future, and what's important is the present and just living in the moment and the people we're with. And it's the story of a young guy named Hiro Yasumi, but he who was an actor as a young man, a child actor, and for reasons that are not made immediately clear, he left that life, and he's living uh, what may appear to some to be kind of as a failure in life. He has sort of a dead end job working at a fishing place near Itabashi Station, which is actually walking distance from where my apartment was when I lived in Tokyo. I know exactly where that is. It's what many people would call a dead end job, but he's someone who is living moment to moment and day to day, but I would say in a good way. And he has a young 18-year-old cousin from his family's hometown out in the boonies somewhere, and she comes to Tokyo to go to art college, and she stays with him because he has a house. And it might seem strange that he has a house, but he has a house because of an interaction he had with someone in his life where he was kind to that person, and his kindness was repaid. And he is a fundamentally kind person. He's not above self doubts, and really, this is both of them. It's really both of their story, but it's really more than anything. I would say it's his story. It's his journey in life. Hiroto, and his cousin's name is Natsumi, and it's though they're the main characters, and there's a very interesting supporting cast. But it's it's how you define success and how you define happiness, I think, are the underlying themes of this series, I would say. And I think that's been pretty consistent across the first 60 chapters. So, Samu, do you have any initial thoughts you'd like to weigh in on with Hirayasumi?
Yeah, I mean, this is one where I think you recommended it to me very early on when it started publishing, and I've been reading it since as well. It's definitely one of the best ongoing manga titles that I'm following right now. I think it's good that you mentioned about his cancer diagnosis at a young age, because when I learned that, it did totally make sense where he's coming from with this series. There is just such a like innate joy to it that just like celebrates life, but not in a way that ever feels tacky or over the top. It just feels so grounded
Mm.
in finding the goodness and normality. And I do think it's actually a really good example of a series done with a primarily adult cast. You know, you've got characters who are slightly different ages and different situations in life, but Keigo Shinzo is doing a great job, I think, of balancing all their expectations that they have on themselves as adults, as students, whatever their job may be. It just feels real in a way that is just really pleasant to read.
Yeah, it is, and again, I think what's important to understand is that Hiroto is not what most people would consider a success, but he is happy, and but he's not above chastising himself for not living up to what society. And this is the choice. This is one of the difficulties in choosing to chart your own path is you're not immune to being aware that society looks down on you for doing it, and I think that's a very interesting element of the series that is talked about. As you said, it is a primarily adult cast, but there's no child characters who are really prominent here. Natsu is she's a freshman in college, so she's a teenager. A young adult is how I would describe her. Hiroto is, what is he, about 30? I guess he is like 30, 31, something like that. And yeah, and so it's characters who are at a very interesting point in their life, where they're still finding themselves, they're still trying to understand who they are, and they have a different range of experiences. Like, for example, another character in the series is Hiroto's best friend from childhood, Hideki, who has a completely different set of problems that Hiro does, because he's married and he's just had his first kid, and he's dealing with all the issues of um, what it's like for a young guy to deal with the realities of being a husband, being a father, and for him dealing with a job that is a job that more people would consider to be like a quote unquote real job, but one in which he's very, very unhappy. So I think the contrast is, like, if you were looking at Hideki and Hiroto from the outside, I think the conventional viewpoint would be that oh, Hideki is more successful, he's happier. But then once you get to know them, you realize that the picture is a lot more complicated. And I think that's one of the definite underlying messages and themes of this series, is the picture is a lot more complicated than what it might appear to be on the surface. Um, so as a series like this, as I say, we've got kind of a redefinition of success and a redefinition of happiness that I think comes from Shinzo Keigo's personal story, and I think that's what inspired him to write this. um it's a series. It feels to me, I don't know about you, Samu, it feels to me like it's very much in the early stages. I feel like, much as in their lives, they're very much in the early stages of their own lives. I mean, then let's face it, 30 years old, you're still basically a kid as far as I'm concerned. I feel like the story that he's telling here has a lot of legs left. It has a lot of room to grow. Where do you think Hirayasumi is in terms of its the arc of its story, not its story arc, but the arc of its story? Do you think we're still in early days, or do you think do you feel like he's coming to a culmination of something he's trying to say, or do you think we're still in the early stages of this story?
It's hard to predict. I mean, I have read one other series from him. I've read Tokyo Alien Brothers. That was
Yeah,
only 3 volumes, and I believe most of his other series are also similar sort of length, all single
yeah,
digit. And I think Kiriyasumi is, if not his longest already, is going to be very soon. So if you're basing it off that, I feel like he is past his like comfort zone of what he usually aims out to do. I agree that narratively, like it doesn't feel like it's going to be, it doesn't feel conclusive yet. But also, I can totally see it being the series that, if it was going to end in 10, 20 chapters, I'm confident it could be wrapped up in a way which still feels like coherent to what we've got so far. And it doesn't necessarily need to have some big conclusion. If anything, I'm expecting it to have a sort of, life goes on,
yeah,
you know, the status quo might change for certain characters, but it's like you say, it's about the journey and present, and the journey won't. I don't think the journey is going to end for any of the characters as we see it. I think more is going to happen off the page that we're just unfortunately not going to be privy to seeing. If I was to guess a number, I wouldn't be shocked if it ends by, let's say, like 10 volumes. So maybe we're
hmm.
just over halfway through. But again,
Yeah.
I think it's a great series. So if it
I
does
mean,
last longer, I am very open to that.
yeah, I mean, and what we don't know is whether the shorter length of some of those earlier series might not have been 100% a voluntary decision. That's what you don't know. But yeah, I agree. The where I agree with you is that it is, as I say, it's what happens on the way is important. It's not about the big epiphanies. It's not about big climactic events. It's about living day to day, and as such, the nature of a story like that is you can end it at any time, really, and have it feel perfectly natural because you feel, in a sense, it's one of those stories that you feel like you picked it up in the middle. You feel like you're almost eavesdropping on their lives in a way, and it's like, oh, we just happened to, this is the day we happened to start eavesdropping, but you totally imagine everything they were doing leading up to that moment, and I think you'll totally imagine everything that they will be doing after we leave them. I think you very succinctly and very eloquently described why that would work. Now, another question I want to ask you is a lot of it less true than with shojo, but to some extent with this sort of sign in too, we see a lot of these series end up rather than getting adapted into anime, getting adapted into live action dramas or even movies. I do think this series is proving to be quite successful. Not blockbuster territory, but even above and beyond its massive critical success, it's a pretty significant commercial success as well. Do you see this going the anime route eventually, or do you think it will get maybe a live action of some sort? What do you think?
I actually think it'll get both. I think it will. I do want it to get an anime, and like you say, it does have a lot of acclaim and success and good sales behind it. So I see that in its future. But again, I also see that it's the sort of if this it's the sort of story that having it be a live action drama also kind of makes a lot of sense. I don't think there's much that you need to stretch or like have an elaborate budget to achieve what the story is doing just because it is so grounded. So yeah, ideal world, why not have both?
Yeah,
Um,
why not have both? Some series do. I mean,
yeah,
and I think by sign-in standards, I think the sales are very good. So I certainly think it's possible. It did go for the anime form. Do you have any ideas of like? Do you see any particular? I know you're not as in tune with anime as you used to be, but do you have any particular names, studios that you would like to see be involved in this? Does it scream anything to you?
you'll have to remind me. Are Brains Base still around? Are they still doing things?
It's so funny because I was just thinking to myself, this is such a brains based series. It's totally a brains based series, but the brains
Okay,
based 10 years
well that's
ago.
my thought.
Yeah, I mean brains based. They had a split with Studio Shuka. Shuka basically formed as an offshoot of Brainspace and took a lot of the talent and Natsume Nujincho, their biggest property, with it. But Brainspace is still around, and it is still kind of in that seinen shojo kind of mindset mode. So I could totally see Brainspace doing this series now. I think you just need, as you said, it's not a series that needs a lot of massive effects or it doesn't need. I could even see somebody like Shin A Animation who does Bokuyaba and did Takagi-san. I think they're very good with those sort of real life grounded side types of stories. Noboru Takagi, the director of Bokuyaba and Takagi-san, I could totally see him being successful as a director of this. But for sure, like Glory Days, Brainspace would be my choice if I were to pick a studio. But even the current Brainspace, I think they could do a good job with it. I think their vibe, their aesthetic is right for it, even if they don't have necessarily the same depth of talent that they had a decade ago.
I feel like maybe
We'll jump into
Dogakoba,
the spoiler
maybe.
section. Yeah, Dogakoba would could potentially be absolutely. I could totally see that. Um, you know, well, I was going to say even Wit, but Wit is they're kind of they're in their own category, and I don't even want to go there. And doing a remake of One Piece, which is another topic I think we should talk about at some point, is rebooting an anime that's still running in the first boot. But anyway, let's talk. We go into this is not a series like Hunter x Hunter or Pluto with a lot of major like mysteries and spoilers to it, but we'll talk a little bit spoilery here if you want to check the timestamps. But so favorite characters and storyline moments so far. My favorite character for sure is Hiro. I just think he's an incredible protagonist. I think he's great. I like all the characters here, but really, honestly, my favorite moments in the series have been um, not even moments in the present, but moments where he's flashback with Wada-san, the old woman who owned the house that he lives in, and there's been some extended flashback mini arcs with Hiroto and her. I actually think those have been my favorite moments of the series. Probably. How do you feel about that?
Oh, those scenes are great. They're definitely up there. I actually quite like the university stuff, like what you have with Natsume and her friend Akari, and her new boyfriend that she has. I think whenever it goes there, and Natsume's journey of being a mangaka as well. Yeah, I like that storyline. Like you, I think Hiroto is my favorite character, and a lot of the moments where it's just him going through life, those are just the easiest and like most joyful to read. I will say I'm a big fan of whenever him and Yomogi, the estate agent, whenever they
Yeah,
interact. I think
yeah,
Keigo Shinzo, the author, he is intentionally taking his time with any development between them. But any time that they are together is, I would say, quite juicy to see like the hint of a development happening between them and the contrast in their personalities as well. Like Yomogi is very much one of those people who is, she's married to her job,
mm,
and you see a lot of scenes with her end of shift, like feeling down on herself, not in a great mood, and having that contrast of a completely different person like Hiroto. I think they bounce off each other wonderfully.
yeah. I agree with you, and it's not a romance series, but it does have romances in it. But it doesn't obsess over the romances. They're it's about it's about life. It's slice of life, really, in with a capital S, in the sense that the term really means, and not as it's often misapplied in this day and age in anime and manga. I do like the college scenes too, because I think he does a very good job of capturing the kind of fragility of college students. And I know we tend to think of college students as being very kind of robust and cheerful and strong, but I think that college students are kind of uniquely fragile in a certain way because they're sort of delicately balanced and this precipice of adulthood is opening up before them, and they're in their last moments before they have to face it head on. And I think it's sort of with a lot of college students, I think you can see that hanging over them, and I think he captures that insecurity and that fragility of college students really, really well. So I like those two. I also like the scenes with Yomogi-san, and as you said, she is a very different sort of person than Hiroto, but that's kind of why it works, because she's someone who needs an anchor. She needs someone solid and grounded, and someone who isn't always chasing something. And he doesn't. If he has a fault, self-recognized even, it's that he doesn't chase things enough. And she's one of those people who's always chasing something. And so even though I do think that Keigo is very sympathetic to Hiro's decision to reorganize his priorities, I don't think he's above faults, the character. And I do think that is something he could use a little bit more ambition in some ways. So I think that's very interesting, especially in the context that she introduced another character completely out of the blue, who is a pretty unique character of the sort that I don't recall seeing in manga before. Who's a writer who's like an ultra minimalist. That's his thing, and he comes through her real estate job. He comes in contact with Yomogi-san, and again, as with Hiroto, though in a different way, the two of them are completely different, completely opposite personalities. She's basically a slob, and he's literally a minimalist to the point of like being OCD about it. I would argue, as someone who is OCD, I definitely see signs of it in him. So he sets up a very interesting. And I don't want to scare people off talking about a love triangle, but he does set off an interesting contrast because she and he have some interesting interactions, and there's clearly some sort of nascent interest between Yo-san and Yomogi-san, but there's also an interest between Hiroto-san and Yomogi-san, and nobody in that group of three is comfortable dealing with the opposite sex and the idea of romance, so they're all still kind of fumbling around it. But and you don't know how it's going to turn out, and because Hirayasumi is a very non-traditional narrative, it is more about the day-to-day life than it is about the events. You don't know which way it will go with that storyline. It really could go any way. I personally love the dynamic with Yomogi and Hiroto, so I hope that's the way it goes, but I could totally see it going the other way, and I wouldn't feel cheated if it did. Especially because, as I said, romance is really not the main thrust and main point of this series. So, any thoughts on the
Well,
romance aspect of
I'm
it?
gonna let me disagree there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna disagree there. I actually would feel cheated if Yo, the minimalist, is the one who quote unquote wins the love triangle,
Hmm.
if it even is a love triangle. But he's a later addition compared to the rest of the cast, and I mean, if I'm completely honest, his chapters or whenever he's around, that's the only time where I'm checking out just a little bit. Um, I do think there's something quite compelling about how Yomogi is caught between these two men who are opposite from heart in completely different ways, and she's
Yes.
drawn to each of them for completely opposite reasons,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is great. It's so interesting to read, but I have to admit, I just the bias comes out in me, where I'm
Yeah.
like, what could come from her
Well,
and Hiroto feels more satisfying than her and Yo.
no,
Um,
I agree. It would be more
so like
satisfying. And because Hiroto is a much more endearing person too. To be honest, I mean, not even just that he's the hero of the series, but I think he's a more endearing person. All right. Well, we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes. Okay. So one of the things that we
I
do
mean,
on
it's
this
still a relatively minor element of the entire
it
series.
is. It is. It is. It's not. Don't get hung up on that. If you're listening to this, that's not the main thrust of the narrative. It's only it's a small part. Okay, so one of the things we do on this show is when we talk about a series at length, is we talk about recommendations for something similar. And so I'm going to give my recommendation first this time. And so thinking about Hirayasumi, it is definitely a true slice of life, and I could see almost any true slice of life being a recommendation. But for some reason, the one that popped to mind for me was Dokyonin Wahiza Tokidoki Atama no Ue, which is another series actually that had an anime. The anime was called My Roommate Is a Cat, and it's about and it's another series that it reminds me. I think the actually when the manga was licensed originally, it was called My Roommate Is Sometimes on My Knees and Sometimes on My Head, because of course the roommate is a cat. And Samu, you yourself are learning about this experience, coincidentally, of having a cat roommate. It's a new experience for you. So the hero of that series is not like Hero in the sense that Hero has a certain easygoing charm with people, and the hero of Dokyon and Wahiza is kind of, he has social anxiety. But I think it is a story about, like Hirayasumi, My Roommate Is a Cat is a story about trying to find the joy in day to day life and trying to cope with the challenges life throws at you just through the act of decency. And I think that is something that it has in common. It's also about dealing with loss. I think there's a same sort of that same sense of when we lose things, they should make us appreciate what we have that much more. I think that's common between the two series. So I do think there's a certain vibe between the two of them that's definitely shared. I also think again, it's just, Hirayasumi, as you said, it may be, it's in my top two or three manga currently running. And I really like My Roommate Is a Cat. I think it's a really an excellent manga. It's well worth pursuing on its own right. So as a companion piece to Hirayasumi, something I would recommend. That's one that stands out for me. How about you?
That might be an appropriate read for me then, if only um, to learn how to adjust with having a cat as a roommate. Yeah, my recommendation goes by the name Koiiji, also Love Glutton. This is by Takako Shimura, who is, I think, most known for her series Wandering Sun or Horo Musuko. I picked this one because, again, it is a slice of life. This one does lean more into romance, which is kind of in Takako Shimura's wheelhouse, but it's very has an adult cast. They all have normal jobs. You have people who work in bathhouses, cafes, estate agents. It just feels like everyday modern Tokyo. They're moving through their lives. Most of the cast are in their late 20s or 30s. So it's quite similar to Hiroto in that sense in his stage of life. I'm a big fan of Takako Shimura. I think she does have her quirks, and I'd even border on saying she has some like fetishes that she likes to incorporate into a lot of her series, which can sometimes be a bit icky. Sometimes they don't read so well, but on the whole, I really enjoy the type of series that she puts out. And yeah, if you're looking for something which has that has characters with similar age of Hirayasumi navigating life, maybe with a bit more romance. Yeah, this is one worth checking out.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Wandering Sun, Horo Musuko. I think it's fantastic. I have to say, I don't know Love Glutton. I mean, I know of it, but I have not read any of it. How long of a series is it? How long does it run? Do you know about how
It's
many
10
volumes? 10 volumes. Okay. And when did it end? How long ago did it end, roughly?
So that's 2014 to 2018. So
2014,
yeah, it
2018.
concluded
Okay.
a good while ago.
All right. I'll definitely, obviously the main thrust of these is to recommend these to our to our listeners. But I will definitely take that because I am a big fan of hers as well. I think I think Wandering Sun is one of probably my top 20 manga of all time. I would say it's really an incredibly
It's
powerful and
up there for
incredibly
me as well.
it's really really fantastic. She is a little fetishy about some things, but one of the things that the likes of Made in Abyss and Hunter x Hunter tell us is sometimes great mangaka can be a little fetishy. Maybe there is something that lends itself to it. Okay, and of course, our swan song for these broadcasts is our final score, our overview rating out of 100. So I'll let you go first this time, Samu on Hirayasumi. What's your score?
I'm gonna go for 89.
89. Okay, I'm gonna go 90. So I'm pretty close to where you are, and
Yeah,
with 90 with a bullet. I think for some of the reasons that we've discussed, it's both an easy series to end because at any point could naturally feel like an end point, but also a challenging series to end in that he has to give it something that feels like an ending. And sometimes giving a series that doesn't appear to have any logical stopping points an actual ending can be one of the biggest challenges there is. So, if he's able to, depending on how long it goes, whether it be 10 volumes, whatever it is, as you predicted, 8 volumes, 15 volumes, whatever it is, if he's able to stick the landing, and if he's able to take this potential romance subplot to a satisfying place, I think this has the potential even to go like historically high mid 90s numbers. But right now, I'm comfortable with 90. That's where I am. Okay, thank you very
I feel
much.
like this is one as well we could revisit once it's done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be very interesting, and hopefully, that's not for a good long time yet. Okay, so that was Hirayasumi, and this has been Guardian Enzo and Samu. As always, thank you very much for listening, and thank you for joining us.